So Dustin Wolf is now officially the Flames goalie of the present and the future with his new deal. Marty, the 7.5 million a year makes Wolf the 10th highest paid goalie in the NHL right now. So that's where he ranks financially. But here's the question. Where does he rank in terms of the league starters?
Well, I would put him a little bit below that, about 15 or 16 when I look at all the starters, but that's only because he's only played 53 games last season as the number one and 71 games total in the National Hockey League. So when I look at that little amount of games that he's played, it's hard for me to put him above some of the guys that have been there for 4 or 5 years. But I do feel that with another season in the same way that Dustin Wolf has played last season, he'd be entering the top 12, top 10. So I think right there, it fits with where the salary structure would be. And let alone when his contract starts in a year from now, he'd still be the 10th paid goalie in the National Hockey League. But there's guys like Sergei Bobrovsky that are going to need a contract after this year. Markstrom, there's goalies that are going to enter the chat that will move Dustin Wolf lower in the pay scale in the National Hockey League. So I think that ultimately this could be a bargain for the Calgary Flames, knowing that they may have a top 10 goalie in the National Hockey League in the future, but they're going to pay him 14, 15, like the 16th most paid goaltender in the NHL. So look, if it all aligns well, I think this is great for the Calgary Flames. But right now, at this moment, I'm putting him about 15, 16 when it comes to all the goalies, all the starters in the National Hockey League.
You mentioned future. I want to follow up on that. He's only 24. How about his future? What's this kid's ceiling?
Well, for me, the ceiling is being in the Vezina Trophy conversation. And I look at UC Saros as the type of goaltender that Dustin Wolf can be like. Look, when Saros took over the number one goalie position in Nashville after Pekka Rinne, he was a small goalie. Everybody said, as a backup, it was fine. But as a number one guy, it's going to be different. Well, you know what? In 3 of the last 4 years, he was in the top 5 of Vezina Trophy voting. And I think Dustin Wolf, because of this, the similarities in their style, in their their height and their size, it's probably going to be the same thing. Now he needs to excel. As a smaller goalie, you need to excel with your athleticism, your speed, your read, but this is the best years for Dustin Wolf to excel because he's 24. So you got him this year at age 50 and starting next year at age 25 for 7 more years. These are the premium years when a smaller goaltender like Dustin Wolf will be at his best. And I say smaller goalie. I've seen him off the ice, right? I think he's listed at just about 6 feet. I think he may be a little taller, 6 feet. He's got the long legs, the long arms, though. He can play bigger than what the stats lines say. When you look at the sheet and you say, hey, he's only 6 feet and 170 pounds. Listen, that's not really the whole story. I think Dustin Wolf, just like Jussi Saros, can play bigger and can be one of those guys that will be in the Vezina Trophy conversation in his career.
Wolf's from Gilroy, California. He'd love to play for Team USA at the Olympics, but he didn't even get an invite to their camp. He says that's a big motivator for him since he feels like he's always been overlooked in his career so far. How do you think the new deal could affect the overall perception of how good he could be?
Well, I think right now it sets him up with his own team, the Calgary Flames in the National Hockey League, and it says your future's all set. But you're right. When you look at international competition and having an orientation camp this summer because the NHL players haven't been to any Olympics in quite a while, so you're bringing in everybody. And when you look at Team USA, Hellebuck, Ottinger, Swayman, well, Demko didn't go. They brought in Joy Daccord. And if I'm Dustin Wolf, I'm saying, I'm as good and better than Joy Daccord. And in 4 years down the road, I'm going to be on that team. I remember in 2006, Ryan Miller and I were partners with the Buffalo Sabres, and we're in December in Philadelphia, and Team USA was going to announce their roster, and Ryan Miller did not get picked to be on the 2006 American team in Torino, and he was mad. Well, you know what? 4 years later, not only was he the starter, he was on the team, he was the starter, took the team to the final, took him to overtime, won a Vezina Trophy, and that fueled Ryan Miller, right, for 4 years to say, I'm going to be that guy. I love Dustin Wolf's reaction saying, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, but right now, he got the business side of it done. Then he can play hockey and think about international hockey as well in the Olympics. But I think he'll be a factor and could be the starter in 4 years down the road for Team USA.
Loads of talent and loads of motivation as well. For the record, only 3 guys currently have better odds than Wolf to win the Vezina, according to FanDuel right now. That's Hellebuck, Shesterkin, and Vasilevsky.